The National Investor's motto is, you can get information anywhere, but here you get knowledge. And for well over 40 years now, Chris Temple has imparted that knowledge, an unparalleled, understandable, and useful take on the big picture of the markets and of our world. He has been out in front of what you see on the news every day on many themes. More, Chris has taken this macro knowledge and his unique analytical abilities to uncover unique investment opportunities. Often he has guided his members to big winners in resources, biotech stocks, and more. His talents and connections often getting him into ground floor opportunities before they are discovered. Without further ado, here is Chris with today's topic.
Welcome, folks. I'm Chris Temple, editor and publisher of the National Investor, and in our latest company spotlight is another oldie but a goodie for yours truly. It's Avino Silver and Gold Mines Limited, a company I've known for an awful lot of years, along with its CEO, David Wolfin, who you'll meet in just a minute, who I've known for a lot of years as well. Avino is a Mexico-focused company. They have a small but robust, and you just kind of like the Energizer Bunny. It takes a licking and it's kept on ticking. It's been around for over half a century, thanks initially to David's late dad, Lou Wolfin, who was the founder of that. And as you see here, there's a marker that indicates his part in starting this thing that is now have a couple of generations of the locals with good jobs. And shareholders with, from time to time, good earnings. I mean, like the recent past with so many resource stocks, lots of ups and downs, but it's a good, solid company, as you're going to learn. And a couple of developments in the last 2 years, especially, it's going to be a significantly larger company going forward as all the boxes hopefully get checked. So David will be talking about a lot of that and some other things, whether he might bring it up or I might bring it up, that could be construed as forward-looking statements. So on the screen here, you've seen their notification of that. Do your homework, go to their website, follow them on social media. Likewise, yours truly. Here's our disclosure on the screen. I have had Avino as a recommendation on and off for a lot of years. They've been a recommendation again for quite a while because I think that we're going to turn a corner here shortly and have a much better market for things like silver and copper going forward. So Avino is on my list for my paid members at the National Investor because of the company's merits. Nobody pays me to be recommended in my newsletter, but after that, from time to time, companies do pay us to do media and copywriting and some other outreach, of which this video is a part. So we want to let you know about that as well. Avino, unlike most smaller and mid-sized mining companies, is actually listed on the New York Stock Exchange, the NYSE ARCA, or American version as it's called, as well as on Toronto. And the symbol both exchanges is ASM, as you see here. And again, you see it here along with their contact information. Make sure that you get in touch with them and as well keep up with yours truly. If you're not already on my mailing list, make sure you get on it, because very shortly following your watching this video, we're going to have a printed issue out on the precious metals markets, gold and silver, their various attributes, and of course Avino going forward as a primary silver story. They do have other base metals that they produce and a little bit of gold, but we're going to have them covered in a profile on the company in my upcoming special issue on the precious metals, which is always entertaining. Annoys some people, educates more people, and I like to educate more people than I annoy as best as I possibly can. So again, as I said earlier, I've known David for a lot of years. This is a family that has already made some good money for our members, because among David's father, Lou, his accomplishments over the years, he was able to get a really cool exploration project in the state of Nevada, which ended up being owned by Coral Gold, which David sold for a very nice chunk of change. Thank you very much, David. On behalf of all of us, you sold that to Barrick. And now David is focused wholly on Avino and Durango, Mexico. You're going to learn a lot about that. So please welcome my good friend, David Wolfin, the CEO of Avino.
Thanks, Chris,
for joining me.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And I'm sorry we didn't run into one another more recently than this. We see each other once or twice a year at one function or another, but it's good to catch up right now, because there's a lot of stuff going on in the markets, as I said earlier, that I think that there's going to be a turning point not many months down the road where we're going to see a better market, I believe, at least for precious metals starting out. Base metals may take a little while to catch up in a bigger way, but I'm thoroughly convinced of where we're going long term, as I'll be explaining in my special issues that are upcoming. But first off, one of the things I found really cool when I first visited Avino down in Mexico several years ago is the geology of that area. And you did a great job explaining that to me and to others over the years. This is an area that was one of the big focuses for the Spanish Empire when they were king of the hill down there in mining. But looking around like this, I almost thought I was looking at a Godzilla movie, and Godzilla's laying on his stomach, and you've got all of these jagged things coming up out of its back. This is the area down there, and it's because in times and ages past, there was such intense volcanic activity to give you the kind of mineral endowment there. So give us a little bit of a background of the Avino complex and the broader, I guess, geology of that area that makes it so rich.
Sure. It's located on a volcanic caldera, as you mentioned. So this is a hotbed of activity. The Avino mine was discovered in 1558 by Captain Iber of Cortez's army, who claimed to have found a mountain of silver, and they formed the city of Durango to mine it. And the beauty of that is infrastructure. So we're located in the heart of Durango in rolling farmland. It's a safe jurisdiction. You're not in a remote area. There's villages surrounding us that built up over hundreds of years, paved road to the doorstep of the mine, electricity, power, or water, and local labor to choose from. So it's all the ingredients are there. It's a great place to work. I worked there as a teenager in the 80s. So I've got a lot of skin in the game. And as you said, my father founded the company back in the late 60s. So it's been a family-run business for a long time, and just keeping it going. And we've been through a few expansions over the last decade, and we're looking now at the largest expansion in the next 5 years with the 2 development projects. So the recently acquired La Preciosa from Coeur Mining, and the oxide tailings project will supplement the Avino mine. The Avino mine produces 2.4 million ounces of silver equivalent right now, and we want to triple that. We want to get up to 8 to 10 million ounces of silver equivalent in the next 5 years.
Well, that's a good, ambitious game plan. And you recently, as I said at the outset, added a couple of pieces. We're going to dive in deeper into both La Preciosa and the oxide tailings facility, which is kind of some cash laying around on the ground, literally almost in your own backyard from years of work, that now with better technology and a game plan, you can reprocess that and add to the till. But I want to focus on Avino for just a second. This is all an underground mine complex. So I had somebody ask me recently, because the president has suggested AMLO in Mexico, who's going out. He's going to be leaving, what, in June, David?
Yeah.
There's going to be a new election in June. There'll be a woman president in Mexico. We just don't know which one, but that'll be after about the middle of the year. But he suggested he wants to outlaw new open pit minings. That has nothing to do with you, because this is all underground. I've been underground at the Avino complex in a couple or 3 different locations there, and can attest to how well run this is, how well constructed it is, and how it's been a good cash generator over the years. I mean, you have times where, you know, the net earnings are pretty good. Maybe the grade suffers a little bit, but metals prices go up. And in fact, last year, I think your numbers were better for a bit less head grade and production. You still seem to, you don't have the official full year 2023 numbers out, but through the third quarter, you still had EBITDA of what, a couple of million for last year?
Yeah.
Or in that neighborhood.
Yeah,
So you've done well. And it's really, I sometimes we use these terms a little flippantly, but it's really appropriate here. This is a meat and potatoes project. This is not any, we're huge discovery, and it's an exploration story. This is something where for over half a century, you've gone through methodically. You've mined silver and copper and some zinc and a little bit of gold. And you've done well at it. You're still there doing it. When I was there, I think the one time you were just in the process of commissioning an added recovery circuit to increase the overall output. And one of the parts of this, I think, the family run aspect of this, the way you've treated local government, I think a major feather in your cap several years ago, David, was when you announced that Samsung, the global Korean giant that makes all manner of electronic devices, phones and whatnot, televisions and so forth, they, like a lot of different companies these days, it's increasingly incumbent upon them by their shareholders, by NGOs and others, that we want to know where you're getting your products from. Where does Samsung get its metals from? And they wanted at least part of that answer to be you. So tell us how that came about.
Well, it's almost 10 years ago. Was presenting at the European Gold Forum in Zurich, and a representative approached me afterwards, and he said that Apple and Intel were promoting, they know where the source of the raw materials come from. And because they have ethical funds that own their stock, they didn't want it coming out that they derive from slave labor operations. And I says, so what does that have to do with Avino? They said, well, you're a family-run business for all these years. You must have done something right. And Samsung's a family-run business. And they said they've been watching us, and they like what we're doing, and they were going to dip their toe in the market and try to secure raw materials at the source from an ethical company. And they wanted to build that business. So they've been working on that for the last decade. They gave us $10 million up front, and so we could use for expanding the mine, and we paid that off, but we still ship our concentrate to them, and goes into electronics or whatever they use it for, TVs, tablets, phones, whatever. And last week we were at the mine, and we went around to some of the villages and handed out tablets and TVs to the local schools. So they were thrilled. And I said, this came from your jurisdiction. It's helping to empower the world, but we just want to give something back to the community in which it derived from. So there was big celebrations at the schools. They're so happy and so grateful. So it was, that's how it came about.
That is awesome. And, I had a conversation a while back with a friend of mine who was starting to learn a little bit more about my newsletter. And he made a comment of, well, gee, a lot of what you advocate, not everything's, I cover a lot of different industries, of course, but he said, you talk about mining a fair bit. You've got a bunch of mining companies that you cover. Isn't that something that's out of favor? We don't do that anymore. And I says, well, if you think so, take that phone in your hands right now and take it to recycling. Say it's 5 Hail Marys or whatever to repent. Get rid of your car while you're at it. Smart TV in your house and so forth. And because what you just explained, David, is the right way to do it. And this is the way things are going. I don't want to segue too much here, but I was on a benchmark minerals intelligence webinar not quite a month ago as we're recording this. And this is a thing that's going to take even greater hold in the world going forward. For all of the turmoil in a lot of the base metals markets, the crazy volatility in lithium, for example, they have unveiled a social score and sustainability pricing model now, starting with lithium, and they're going to do it for all the other key battery and base metals going forward. And it's going to penalize a company in more than one way. If you buy anything, from a bad actor, from a bad jurisdiction, a jurisdiction that doesn't have good environmental controls, I mean, that's going to really disrupt the nickel market going forward. It's going to disrupt cobalt, which is still a lot of it comes from these little children in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. I mean, literally working in conditions that in the worst times in the garment factories, a century and a half ago in the US, they didn't work in conditions like this. So it's all going to change. And kudos to you and Avino for getting the attention of a Samsung, which, and again, all of these companies are going this way. There's no question about it. And it's good that you've had the ability to kick out a fairly consistent, and I've seen the process, folks. It's really a modernized recovery method. You've got a concentrate that has Are there two different ones these days, two different concentrates?
It depends where we're mining. So
All right.
right now it's a copper concentrate with silver and gold in it, or it's deemed copper. There's quite a bit in there, and Samsung really wants that product. But we've created zinc and lead concentrates in the past as well. We have 4 independent circuits in the mill, so we're able to segregate if we can't mingle it together. So it's the beauty of that plant, being able to do that. And with the onset of La Preciosa, we're going to be producing a precious metals concentrate when that comes online.
Cool. And we're going to get to that after I bring up one more big piece of news, however, from last summer, because you and I talked about this looming possibility several months before when we ran into one another at a conference. We were talking about some of the future exploration plans, because with this underground vein system at the Avino complex, and there's several different locations. You stop at one and you drill some more over here and you find more. But one of the things you had never done to this extent in the past as much was drill deeper. And for anybody watching us, even if you're not that versed in mining terminology, folks, you do probably have an ability to get your head around a simple fact of pressure and physics and whatnot, where eons past, you have an explosion toward the center of the earth, molten material rises, comes toward the top. It's almost like you have a volcano within a volcano, and these things don't always make it to the surface. Oftentimes it's the outshoots of the main part of a volcano, which is where you get the material that Avino has been mining for half a century. But what becomes tantalizing, especially in a volcanic cordillera, as is in this area, is if you come across something that some call it a porphyry system, some call it others of that. It's a more homogeneous, larger, more intact area where a lot of the stuff closest to the surface emanated from. And when you said last July the 5th, David, that the news you had put out that day was probably the most important intercept in the company's history, we'll see if that holds true going forward as you do more drilling. But the big part of this is that as you go deeper, you're starting to see more copper. And that's always the telltale, or one of the telltale signs that you're getting to something juicier the deeper that you go. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and we hired the services of 2 world-renowned structural geologists. So they're helping us this year interpret that information and giving us advice before we drill some more. So one guy is ex-Newmont out of England, and the other guy is Jeff Hedenquist out of Ottawa. So they're both in high demand to try to figure that out. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, and just trying to figure out where the source is, and is the mother lode down below, where, because maybe we're mining the smallest part of it, and we should be thinking bigger. So we're following their instructions before we spend more money on drilling.
Well, that's going to be interesting to see as the months and maybe a few years go by, and capital willing, if it's available, to do more aggressive drilling down below. Yeah.
And so one of the things that they recommend is a fluid inclusion study. So you study the boiling points of where the mineralization came up and where the temperatures are. They try to model that and learn from that. So there's important information that comes from that, and they can tell by looking at the rock where if that was the heat source or not. So we're learning some interesting things. And, we've been involved for 50 years and never drilled down there. So our partners for 27 years were a private family. So they didn't have a lot of money to go drill down there. And then when we acquired the 100%, that was in mid 2000s, we embarked on some drilling, but we wanted to get cash flow. So got the mine up and running. And then when we acquired La Preciosa, we're thinking bigger. We're like, wow, maybe we should drill below here, because at some point we got to optimize everything. And if we don't drill it off, then we may be missing something in an optimization study. So that was one of the reasons what led to that.
Sure.
And so there's still plenty of potential on the property. humans don't have X-ray vision, so
Nope.
the best place to mine is where they mined in the past, because maybe they didn't get it all,
Yeah.
so
No, that'll be interesting story as it unfolds. And as you said a minute ago, the year just passed. You finished up most likely with around 2.4 million
yeah,
silver
yeah,
equivalent ounces. You've put out some preliminary game plans for 2024 that you're thinking that's going to be bumped up a
yeah,
fair bit to 2.5 to 2.8 million ounces. But what is looming out there, and you've alluded to it a couple of times, is your second major property,
yeah,
apart from Avino, and that is La Preciosa. You acquired that from Coeur in early 2022. And it seems like every time I turn around and do one of these discussions with one of the companies I'm covering, there's a factor that recurs again and again. One of the ways that successful companies are building themselves for the future right now is on either mistakes or the leftovers of larger companies. And Coeur overextended itself in a few different ways in recent years. And like a lot of companies, I mean, Newmont, as some of you saw that follow precious metals, just came out with they're going to sell $1 billion worth of assets. So that's really getting serious. Not that they're bad assets either, but
no, no, they'll be company makers for little companies.
they will,
Yeah,
but Newmont, again, just a quick segue, Newmont Mining, the biggest gold mining company now in the world, after acquiring Newcrest, which once upon a time was a part of Newmont, spun out years ago, now it's back in the fold. There's both companies had some really nice projects that they're going to sell. And may not be at fire sale prices like we see in some instances, but as you said, David, I don't doubt this. They will be company makers for a few people. I know a couple of
yeah,
these projects that they can be company makers for somebody else, but for various reasons, La Preciosa became redundant to Coeur. They didn't want to focus on it again, but it was what it was a standalone project and not worth their trouble. Now, as part of the Avino neighborhood, there's economies of scale and a lot of things that come in. So give us the backstory about how you came in contact with Coeur and realized that this is something that would be
yeah.
more accretive specifically to you.
Well, because it's not far from our property, we've been following it for decades. So when Orco acquired it from Lewisman, a Mexican conglomerate, they were drilling old workings and made the discovery, the Martha discovery, which was hidden at depth. And the geologist told me that he went back into town to go to have dinner and go to bed. And he came back out the next morning and he saw that they drilled too far and he was going to ream them out, the drillers. And then he noticed the core had hit a blind target. And so he wouldn't admit that now in front of everyone. It was on purpose, but no, I'm just joking. But it's turned out to be huge. And then in 2013, Coeur bought it for $358 million. And then they did a feasibility study, and it was to build a giant open pit mine, which you mentioned earlier. The president is not in favor of open pit mines. So Coeur decided, rather than sinking another 300 million, to be either 600 or 700 million, the silver mine, and metal prices were going down from when they acquired it in 2013. I think silver was up near 30 and it went down. So, they focused on their expansion in Nevada, and they were selling non-core projects. I had approached Mitch, the president, over the years, and I said, if Newmont and Barrick can have operational synergies in Nevada, we shouldn't compete either. So, I mean, that's just how you should operate anywhere, right? Pool your resources so you're not competing on labor and that sort of thing. So it ended up coming to us in a sale, and they went exclusive with us because we have the infrastructure there. Anyone else would have to duplicate what we have. That doesn't make sense. So we bought it for 30 million upfront consideration. So 10 cents on the dollar. There's other considerations, royalty, and if we find more resources that could escalate that amount. So we're thrilled about that, and we've submitted with the environmental permitting department to get the permit to go and start mining. So we're hoping we'll get that in the next few months, and we're making the preparations on surface. So we're clearing areas, we're rehabilitating an office building and getting ready for when we get that permit and we can start the decline onto the Gloria vein. So we're anticipating that will happen probably within 4 to 6 months. And then if we could, we have the equipment to break ground. We've got a jumbo and scoop tram ready to go. So we think at some point next year we can be pulling fresh ore out of the ground and going into the mill. We're thrilled about that because that will really reduce our consolidated costs, because we'll have higher grade going into the mill and improve recovery rates and outputs. So it's a win-win situation for us.
Well, that's good news. And the other bit of good news came just last month, not long after the first of the year, when you got your good housekeeping seal of approval from the community.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we had an agreement with the local Hitos. Those are a coalition in each village of people that reside over what goes on in their jurisdiction and promotes business and that sort of thing. So you need their blessing in order to get the permit. So we got the blessing and filed the permit like the next day. And so we're thrilled about that. They're thrilled about getting high paying jobs in an area where it's just, farming and like agricultural and cattle ranching and that sort of thing. So it'll help the area.
That's neat. Real quick before we go to your third project, the oxide tailings facility. When you brought La Preciosa into the fold, that increased the overall grade when you average it out, because that's higher grade material that what's known. And you also increased your overall resources. So all told, with everything, you're up pushing 400 million silver equivalent ounces. You're
371 million.
371 million silver equivalent resources in all categories. Hopefully that'll increase, especially at Avino, as you do more exploration drilling based on what we talked about before. But the good thing, as you alluded to, and I'll just kind of pin you down on it for lack of a better term, there's really not a whole lot of drilling or development costs, because you already know what you got at La Preciosa. It's almost a turnkey operation. You're going to go in and mine what's already known. Not that you won't do more exploration there down the road.
Between Orco, Pan American Silver, which had an option on it for a period of time, and Coeur, there's 1,500 drill holes. So we've heard estimates between 90 and 100 million dollars has been spent drilling the property. So it's very well known.
And it's nice that it's somebody else's money and you're not doing this.
Exactly. And it's not being reflected in our value of our company. So we're very undervalued. So it's a great time to be looking at Avino.
Well, and no question about that. And in my mind, at least, and there's so many stories out there right now of incredible projects. I won't mention the name, but there's one of the premier nickel exploration projects on this entire continent of the recent few years. Got one of the biggest new resources out there. Nickel is in short supply. It's a strategic metal. We were in it for a while. I advised selling because I was worried about the near-term thing. Not about the company as much as I was about just the broad market. And regrettably, for everybody's sake, including yours, I was vindicated that the market was getting worse as far as share prices before it got better. But this nickel company, David, is selling for about half of what it was when I advocated selling it. And since that time, they've had two major announcements of big names putting money into this thing for the future. And yet investors still don't care. And their share price is still subdued. So I keep saying that, and I know you'll agree, that one by one, I don't know if it's going to be copper that's going to lead. I do think that the precious metals, gold and then silver, probably are going to take the lead when things really start to get fired up in the coming months or maybe year or so. And then they'll start dragging the base metals behind them. But one by one, I'm thoroughly convinced that we're going to see behaviors like we had with the uranium price for the last 2 years, where the uranium price has gone up 5-fold. from an absurdly low price, not even remotely what the cost of production was. And all of a sudden it got in everybody's head, holy cow, with the build out of nuclear energy in the world and so forth, uranium is just too cheap, and it's become a mad dash for people to get into that space. And it's going to be reflected every place else, because in one way or another, the stories are all the same. For what the world needs for infrastructure, old and new alike, for the so-called energy transition, which is really only an energy addition in different ways, because every year the world needs more energy of all kinds, etc. There's just not enough of any of these things in the hopper.
Nope.
And place your bets, folks, before everybody else wakes up to that, is all I can
Well,
say.
the perfect storm is coming.
Yeah.
Gold near all-time prices, and no one cares about the equities associated to it because of the ETFs and the interest rates. So interest rate, people can get 5% without any risk. Wait till that changes. So that's coming in the second half of this year. Powell says is dropping the interest rates. So the gold prices should stay up here because central bank buying. China's converting their US dollars into gold. So, so the perfect storm is coming. We're in a cyclical business. It's not going anywhere. And like the Rothschilds say, when there's blood in the streets, that's when you should be soaking it up. And
Exactly right.
Right now, these juniors, there's so many that are so cheap. Like I wish I had Warren Buffett's money, just buy them all up.
Well, I'll tell you, I had this conversation earlier today. We're recording this on Monday, the 26th of February, but just over this last weekend, there was a news item that came out, the Financial Times and others covered it, that Elliott Management, big private equity firm, just came out and said, this is getting stupid. We're committing our first $1 billion to buying cheap mining assets because this just is not sustainable. And there will be others that come on. Elliott Management is smart among its peers because there's not many other people that are coming out and saying, we're going to put our money where our mouth is because this is not going to be sustained. So before we end, I want to cover that oxide tailings facility that you've got. For many years, of course, as you process, you mill the ore, you get your concentrate, you put the dregs, over here in this great big holding area. And, just like a lot of other places in the world where companies have done this over the years, technology improves, times change, and now you realize that on that lake with muck and whatnot and old tailings, that you've got over 100,000 ounces of silver and several thousand ounces of gold that you've just came out with a study on that you can reprocess and make some decent money on.
100,000 ounces of gold and about 14 million ounces of silver. So all the profits from the 70s and 80s are sitting in the waste pile. And we've known about it all along, but we couldn't access it because it was an active tailings dam. So we recently commissioned a $10 million dry stack tailings storage facility. This is state of the art because we're planning for the future. We don't want any catastrophes. So we got the best technology and that squeezes all the moisture out. So then it can't move. So now we've decommissioned tailings storage facility number 1. We followed out the PEA recommendations and we put 150 drill holes into it. We metallurgically tested it and did a pre-feasibility study. So it's got a 61 million after-tax NPV with a 5% discount. Our market cap's less than that. This is a proven and probable reserve. So I laugh because it's so undervalued, this company, and we were a bit artificially undervalued because we did go down with the sector, but Coeur decided to sell the 14 million shares that we gave them when we acquired the property, so that didn't help. And there was a lot of shorting going on, and it put extra pressure on the company. So when this thing snaps back, the stock's going to really have a good run. And I think it's possibly towards the end of this year when the interest rates start going down, you're going to see money inflow because you saw record outflows of the ETFs. So that's going to reverse and it's going to rise all boats. It's going to rise the junior sector.
Well, at least a producer. I think that there's a lot of little 3 and 5 million market cap greenfield out there that I don't. A lot of them should have gone bust before now, David. But in your case, you're producing.
real assets, and the producers are the best because they can monetize right away. The other ones are dreaming. When are they going to have a mine? Do they even have the expertise? It's a whole different set of expertise, having engineers and that sort of thing from an explorer. So we have both. We've got the upside of finding more material and monetizing it at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've got a great game plan laid out here. I mean, you've got the Avino mine itself as an anchor, but now you've got these other assets. And importantly, you've still got good cash flow, even though the market cap is one story, but you've got good finances, and that's important. And you've done well, even at a time when it's been difficult for Mexico-based producers because of all the crazy things that a lot of people don't follow this regularly probably don't even know.
Yeah.
The Mexican peso,
well, the peso got stronger last year, so that hurt us because we're paying everyone in pesos and selling in dollars, so that hurt. Plus, we were mine sequencing in a lower grade area. There was a bunch of things, and there was a supply chain disruption, so waiting for critical pieces of equipment. All these things affected us, but we seem to have turned the corner. That's behind us. We're mining higher grade. That equipment's arrived. The peso settled down a bit, so we'll see. I'm expecting a better year this year.
Well, and importantly, folks, if you're looking at this sector for opportunities, and lots of stocks are bombed out, good stories and bad alike. This is not only, in my view, one of the good stories, if not one of the better stories, but importantly, number one, it's a producer, and number two, and keep this in mind, that when investors start to come back into this space, and nothing against companies listed primarily in Canada or on the junior exchanges, because there's good companies out there, some of them on my list. But when you're talking about institutions, when you're talking about big investors, they want something with liquidity, and they want something on a New York exchange, and they want something on a Toronto exchange as well. And of the whole universe of companies you can buy, there's only a small proportion of precious metals related companies, base metal ones for that matter, until you get up to the big ones like the BHPs and Vales and Glencores that you mentioned earlier. There's not that many out there that meet that criteria.
We have 371 million ounces of silver equivalent. So it's over 3 ounces per share. So the value there, in the safest vault in the world, in the ground. So stay tuned.
That's true. Well, David, look, it's a great story. I'm looking forward to continuing our long relationship and following all of this with you, and hopefully make it down again one of these days before too terribly long, when you're all down there. Folks, again, as a reminder, make sure you contact Avino, get on their mailing list, follow them on social media, yours truly as well. And again, if you are not already on my mailing list, make sure you get on it, because you're going to see a lot more about Avino in the weeks immediately ahead. So David, thanks so much. My best to everybody back at the ranch, and hope to see you all again soon.
Thank you.
Take care.
For much more of the National Investor's cutting-edge content and actionable investment opportunities, make sure to subscribe to Chris's free content at nationalinvestor.com. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel too. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.